Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we got this Kawasaki Vulcan back in here since we got it running. If you watched the last video with the fuel pump issues and stuff, since we got it running now, the customer brought it back and he wants to do a few more things to it. We're just going to service it. We're going to change the engine oil and filter. He wants to replace a gasket on the stator cover that has been leaking oil. So there'll be a gasket behind here. We're gonna go ahead and replace that, stop the oil leak, and then he wants to put new brake pads on it as well. So I figured I'd make a quick little video on that. Right now the bike's still warm because the customer just rode it to me from his house. So I'm gonna go ahead and drain the engine oil while it's warm. I don't want to really work on anything while the engine's hot. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the oil draining, let that do its thing while it cools down a little bit. To drain the oil on this model, there's a 17mm bolt right here. We're gonna go ahead and take that out. I like to use a wrench just because I think it fits cleaner. A lot less chance of rounding off the bolt or something than with a socket. A lot of times your socket sticks off there so far that when you pull it, it gets in an angle. And on this, I just like to use a wrench. Got that draining. The oil coming out of it doesn't look that bad, but like I said, it has an oil leak that we need to fix, so we're gonna have to drain it anyways. And we just want to freshen it up. So there is a crush washer on here. Make sure that comes off with the bolt. If not, it may be sticking still to the engine cases there. You want to get that off, replace it if you can. All right, we've got the drain plug out, got the crush washer off too. We've got them cleaned up, ready to reinstall. We're gonna go ahead and take this fill plug out. I like to use a quarter and some pliers so it doesn't strip out. Just like that. Go ahead and get that out of there. Inspect the O-ring, clean that up as well. O-ring appears to be in good condition. It's not flat or smashed. It doesn't have cracks in it. All right, now that the oil's pretty much drained out, we're gonna go ahead and start pulling these engine covers off to get to the gasket that we're replacing. I'm gonna go ahead and take the whole footrest off. Two 14mm bolts on the bottom. It just gives you a lot more room to be able to get around and get this cover off there. It makes it a lot easier. If you don't have this off, it's hard to get these bolts out, these two here, and it also makes it a little bit of pain when you pull that off to be able to clear the shift linkage and everything. Now we're gonna go ahead and take this chrome cover off. You can see there's a little bit of the oil leakage right here. We'll go ahead and we'll clean all that out before we put it back together, but you can just stick the bolts in there so you know all those bolts go to this. You can look down here. I don't know how visible it is on the camera. You can see some oil that's ran this way while it was driving and the wind was blowing it out, but the oil is leaking down here at the bottom of the gasket. So when you go ahead and get this cover off as well, I'm going to slide my drain pan out here to catch any oil that's going to come out of there because the engine's leaning this way. It's on its kickstand. Don't want to make a mess. Your sight glass is right here. If you're wondering for this model, we can go ahead and wipe that down, clean it up a little bit, make it easier to see the oil level when we fill it up. These have two marks here. You can see, sorry, I'll try to get it to focus a little bit. You can see a mark on the casting right here and here. That's going to be your low and high level for the oil. When you take the bolts out, you will notice that some of them are longer than the others. Those have shoulders on them, these do not. It doesn't really matter right now, just take them all out. I'll show you when we put it back together how to know which ones go where. We've got all the bolts out of this cover. I'm going to go ahead and pull it open just a little bit to let the oil that's in there run out. You can see it dripping down here. We'll go ahead and let that run out for a little bit before we pull it all the way off of there. There is a dowel pin on the front and behind, I believe, this bolt. So you will have to rock it forth quite a bit to get the corrosion and rust off of that to get it to pop off, but eventually it should come free. You also have the flywheel behind there, so you're gonna have the magnet's gonna be trying to stick. And you see we've got it off here. And the gasket is a mess. So you can see right here, the gasket's been damaged. Right there, the gasket has been damaged.
Yeah, if you go to like there's a courthouse in Kentucky, beautiful part of the country, like kind of in the mountains, and there's like a plaque, like a historical plaque. It's basically,
Yeah, that gasket's in pretty rough shape. I may go ahead and remove this rear cover too, just to allow these wires to come out a little bit and let this get out of the way so we can clean it up a lot better. Alright, we've got the cover off of there. I went ahead and removed this rear sprocket cover too, just to get it out of the way so I could move this back a little bit more. Be careful with the stator wires. You can see these are in kind of rough shape. Somebody put some silicone all over them. I'll clean all that up before I put it back together. But the main thing we want to do is clean everything up, because that OEM gasket has some glue on it and it sticks to the cases here that you can see. We want to clean all that off, have a nice clean smooth surface, dry surface before we put the new gasket on, or we're just going to have oil leaks again. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all this up with some contact cleaner real quick, as well as this. That you can see there's some gasket debris in here. I want to get out of there too. And then I might scuff it up just a little bit with some Scotch-Brite on both sides to clean that glue off of there before we put the new gasket on. Alright, we've got the gasket surfaces cleaned up. We've cleaned out all the case, everything inside here. There's no remaining gasket residue or glue or pieces and anything like that. So we can go ahead and put the new gasket on this side. We got 2 dowel pins. I'll pull this one out and put it in here, put the gasket on there. We know we have a nice dry clean surface, and then we can put the cover back on and bolt it down. We have a brand new OEM Kawasaki gasket to put on there. It's also a good time while you're in here to check and make sure that your pickup coil and your stator and all these plate bolts are tight, so that you don't have any kind of catastrophic failures after you've fixed everything. It also helps to grab the right size Allen socket here. You have 2 rubber grommets here coming from the stator and the pickup coil, and they need to be put in the correct position, and I'm going to peel all this old material off of there, the old silicone, and reseal that just a little bit. All it needs is a little dab here to help the gasket seal, and then it'll be good. You don't have to get crazy with it. Alright guys, sorry the battery on my camera decided to die, and I don't have time to wait around not to charge up. So I'm just going to record the rest of this with my phone. Hopefully that's alright. But you can see we got the new gasket on, got the cover put back on, mount up the footrest again. Everything's taken care of over here. Working on finishing the oil change. And you have to remove the regulator rectifier off of this model. It mounts right here. You have to take it off to get the oil filter off. And I noticed here that the mount is actually rubbing on the oil filter, which is not good. That could vibrate and put a hole in the oil filter and leak oil out of there too. So first of all, I'm going to verify that that's not an aftermarket oil filter, that is a little bit longer or whatever in touch, and that if not, I can just extend this bracket out a little bit here, get that away from the oil filter. But I'm going to go ahead and get that off of there to get the oil filter off and finish changing the oil. Got that bracket off of there, and you can see where it was rubbing the oil filter there, where it's rusted a little bit. Let's go ahead and get this oil filter off of there. Not extremely tight, I love it. Makes my life a lot easier. It is a Wix filter, so there's a chance that it's a little bit longer than the OEM one, and that's why it's hitting that bracket. We'll see though when we get everything apart. We have an OEM Kawasaki filter here to replace it with. We'll check the length differences on those filters as soon as this gets done draining. We pull it off. Here's the differences in the height of the filters. Not much. It may provide enough clearance to not rub that bracket, but I'm probably going to end up changing the spacers a little bit to get that a little bit further away from the filter. The O-ring on the Kawasaki filter comes pre-greased. I don't know if you can see it there. Got the O-ring all taken care of. We're going to go ahead and put this on there. All right, with the OEM filter on there is enough of a clearance. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but it is not rubbing with that one. So apparently that little, you can see there's clearance. So just that little difference between this filter and the other filter, the aftermarket filter, there was rubbing. So now you know that. Might pay attention to that. If you ever put a Wix filter or aftermarket filter on something, you might want to check those kind of things. All right, we've got the regular rectifier and the cover mounted back up. While I was down here, I happened to notice that the heat shield has came undone from the clamp here, so I'm going to loosen that up, get that slip. There's a little finger back here that slides over. Tighten that back up. I'm sure that's noisy while it's running. We'll do that. We'll stay on one task at a time here. Let's get the drain plug in and get it filled up with oil before we do that. We've got the mating surface for the crush washer cleaned up. We've got the bolt and the crush washer clean as well. We're gonna go ahead and get the drain plug in it. We'll torque that down and then move on to filling it up with oil. Move over to the other side of the bike. We've got the fill hole here that we removed the plug from earlier. Go ahead and put a funnel in there, and then we'll look up the manual and see what the amount of oil is supposed to be, what the oil capacity is supposed to be. We'll fill it up to where it shows up on the side glass and make sure those two coincide. Just as important as changing the oil, you want to make sure that your funnel is clean inside. There's no point in changing oil if you're just going to wash debris out of a dirty funnel right back into the engine. We can go ahead and put the oil in. The capacity for this is 3.4 quarts with the filter change, 3.2 without a filter. We can watch our sight glass after we get 2 or 3-ish quarts in, just to make sure that we're in the right ballpark. All right, we've got about 3 quarts in, so I'm gonna go ahead and stand the bike up straight, and we should see the sight glass level come to where it should be. We're in between the 2 lines in the casting there. So we're gonna go ahead and start the machine and let it prime the oil filter after we put this plug back in. We'll let it prime the oil filter, prime the whole system, come back to rest, and then we'll check the sight glass again. We're probably gonna have to add just a little more. We let it run for a few minutes, shut it off, let it sit for a few minutes. Let's stand the bike up straight and check the sight glass. Okay, we're a little low. Need to bring it up. It's probably the 0.4 of a quart that's left to add to it. All right, we're at exactly 3.4 quarts total. Stand up straight, see where we're at. Perfect. We'll go ahead and put the fill cap back in. I'm gonna go wash this thing because I want to get any of the oil that was leaking off of it before we bring it back in, check it for leaks, and then we'll check that oil one more time after we run it to the car wash and back. I bent my quarter, don't tell Trump. We're gonna dump our old oil into this empty container, take it to recycle, get rid of it the proper way. We've got the old oil transferred over into this jug, put the old filter in this box. I like to do that just to keep it from getting oil all over everything. It's not a bad idea when you're transferring the oil into here, since you're pouring it slowly, to watch for any kind of metal shavings, particularly brass colored or copper colored shavings. That would indicate that your rod bearing is going, and if you see that in your oil, there's no point in even going any further. You're going to have a seizure soon, so may as well just stop riding it and fix the bottom end. But this one had no shavings whatsoever, so we can be confident that the bottom end's in pretty good shape. All right, let's move on to the brake pads before we go wash this thing. Brake pads on a motorcycle are a lot more simple to replace than most people realize, and I'll explain that to you. So on this particular setup and on a lot of motorcycles, this pin right here will actually slide out. You can pull the pads out, stick the new pads in, and then put the pin back in. There's a clip behind this pad that allows that pin to come out. The thing that you need to pay attention to, though, or the thing that's going to help you do this and allow you to do it properly, is right now the pistons, you can see right there, they're pushing out because that pad is warm, and they naturally apply pressure. So those pistons are pushing out and putting pressure on the pads right now. To be able to fit new pads in, we need to compress this brake caliper all the way that way. You can see it can slide this far on the pin. We'll max it out that way, and that'll give us the gap with the pistons pushed all the way in to be able to slide the new pads in. Also, you need to watch the other end of the pad right here on both sides, the back side and the front side, to make sure they go into the guide. What we need to do is compress this caliper to push the pistons back in before we take this pin out, and then we can slide our new pads in. What I like to use is this rubber mallet here. You can stick that right on the caliper here, grab the tire, and put your body into it and just press. You can see how that went in. This is completely bottomed out here. Pads are loose. Now we can scoot this pad over a little bit and you can expose the pin here. We're gonna go ahead and take the caliper off here. All right, we've got the caliper off. I'm gonna lay something over this exhaust so it doesn't scratch it. Got the caliper off so you can see what I was talking about. This, you can rotate this down, pull this pad off. This side snaps in right there. Lift that up off there. Good time to clean. All right, get our new pads out and get ready to put them on. All right, we've got our new pads. You can see they're way thicker than the old ones. That's why you need to create that space to get the new pad in there. You're looking at the pad, see how much thicker they are. Try not to contaminate them too much with your hands. We're gonna go ahead and put the side with the guide on first. See, it slips right there. Slips around that. That's why this guide is here, so it doesn't wear on that. And then this groove right here, this ear right here, sets on that side of that. And then they have spring pressure up, pushing down from the top too. You want to set it on this pin here, rotate it around, make sure that it is on the right side of the ears on the guide. At that point, we can go ahead and push our pin back through. I'm actually going to clean that up so that this pad slides smoothly. We've got most of the surface corrosion off of this pin so that the pads can slide nice and smoothly on it. And you can see right here, that's where the clip goes through to hold that in. You want to make sure that that pad sets on these tabs right here. You want it set on this side of those tabs because this side is fixed. That side gets pushed against them. And you can go ahead and put some pressure on it to line the pinholes up. Stick that pin back through. Make sure it goes all the way through. Spin it a little bit to line up your clip holes. And then you can put the clip back in. All right, now that we've got that mounted back up, the most important step would be to pump them back up. And the reservoir's up here. I went ahead and took the cap off of it. As you can see, the fluid is dirty fluid, so it needs replaced. I'm gonna recommend that to the customer. But we're gonna go ahead and push down the foot brake. And you'll watch the rotor eventually tighten up, which it just did. Our pads are nice and tight on the rotor. Those should be done, besides replacing the fluid. I'll talk to the customer about that, see if they want to do it. As you can see, the front's going to be pretty much the same process. I pulled it off here, but I've already compressed the pistons by pressing on it. The pin is going to be right here. You can pull that pin out to remove the pads. Go ahead and use our needle nose and we'll slide that pad over so you can get to the pin. Got the pin out. Now we can pull this guide pin. Take it out. You can pay attention to the pads and make sure you get everything right, but see how this one's locked in because of the grooves on the guide plate. So we're gonna lift it up, slide it off. This one you can just pull out. It locks in the same way that other one did, right here and right here. Clean that pin off. Let's go clean this guide pin off so that the pads slide smooth. You can see we got a nice smooth finish on that pin now. We'll go ahead and put the new pads in. Kawasaki makes it really nice. You can just open up the bag, dump them out, put the old pads back in this bag. All right, let's go ahead and put the pads in. First one we're gonna want is this one. It's going to stick in here. Make sure it gets locked on that side of the guide there. That keeps it from rubbing. There's a little there, and make sure it locks in on that side. And then you can see it's got spring tension to line up with the hole. Make sure it's all the way against the pistons. Take this side, it's gonna go like this, slide it around that pin, move it down, lock it in, and then you can find the spot right there where it sets on those, on the springs. You can see it's got spring tension. All right, we've got the pads all in there. We can go ahead and put the pin back in. Push down just a little bit to put some tension on the spring to allow it in there. Line up your hole that the clip slides into. Go ahead and put the clip back in. Space your pads out so they can slide over the rotor, and then we'll go ahead and slide it back over the rotor. All right, let's go ahead and put this back together. Got it slid over the rotor there. Go ahead and put your bolts back in. Make sure it's lined up. All right, we've got it mounted back up here. Caliper moves nice and freely. Let's go ahead and pump up the brakes. Most important part. The reservoir for the front is right here. I will take that off there and check the fluid too. Let's go ahead and pump it up. Should get tight. There it is, nice and tight. Right at the click is when the pads touch. I like it. On these front reservoir bolts, they're Phillips head. Use an impact driver, because these do strip out. That's probably why you can see these screws here are new. They probably broke off before, got stripped out, had to get drilled out. Let's go ahead and take those out, take a look. Before I pull that cap off, I'm gonna look at the sight glass. What's going on? You can see it's filthy, but there is fluid in it. Looks like it may be high. If I flush the fluid and clean out that reserve, you'll be able to see through the sight glass a lot better. Take off the cover, pull the baffling out. Not sure why there's fluid on top of that. This thing must be severely overfilled. I'm gonna get something to cover the tank so that fluid doesn't leak down on it. All right, I've got the fluid level back to where it's supposed to be. The rear reserve was also too high. I took some out of it, got it to where it was supposed to be. You can see there's a line here, a lower and upper, and it was completely up to the top of the reservoir here. So I went ahead and took some out of it, got it to where it's supposed to be. Anything hydraulic, you don't want too much fluid in because it has nowhere to go. All right, let's put the baffle back in. Whenever you put that in, if your fluid level is too high, you'll have fluid seeping out whenever you put that in. You shouldn't have fluid seeping out when you put the baffle in. Go ahead and put this cover on. I know that I'm going to be replacing the fluid in this, but I'm putting it all back together because I plan to test ride it and take it up to the car wash and give it a good wash too, to get all the oil and everything that was leaking beforehand off of it. Go ahead and tighten those bolts back up. Go ahead and tighten those up. You don't have to kill these. You basically just want it to, put some pressure on that rubber baffle in there, so you want it to close that gap to where it's not leaking out. You'll be able to feel it when it hits that. So just get it to that point, and that's plenty. All right, now I want to test ride this thing, and I'm going to do that by taking it up to the car wash, giving it a good wash down and clean up. And then I'll contact the customer, see if he wants to flush the rear and the front brake fluid. I highly recommend it to get all that crap out of there. And then after that, this thing should be good to go as long as we have no oil leaks. All right, so we fixed the leaking cover over here. I'm not putting the chrome cover back in because I'm going to clean it off. And I want to be able to see if there's any oil leaking or anything. And I'm going to wash behind there, get all the grime off from the old oil leak. We fixed that. We changed the engine oil and filter. We took care of the filter rubbing the voltage regulator issue. We replaced the brake pads. We found out that the fluid was dirty. We're going to talk to the customer about that and suggest that they flush the fluid. But let's go take this thing for a test ride and wash it off. All right guys, we're back from the test ride and I gave it a rinse down. I didn't get too crazy with it, just spiffed it up a little bit, get some of the grease and dirt and the old oil off of it. He lives on a gravel road, so I'm not gonna get crazy with it, but shined up some of the chrome, got some of the crud off of it. But there was something I wanted to check into. He said he was having a stability issue. It feels like the bike's a little squirrely. I checked the alignment of the rear wheel and the rear wheel bearings. They're all good. The belt alignment's good. The tires are junk, we know that, but he's gonna replace them. I mean, they're the main cause of it, but I think it can be a little better. If you look at this tire, it's pretty worn out, but it's got waves in it too, so that's going to cause some instability. I tested the front wheel bearings and the steering stem bearings. There's no play in them, but the steering is super sloppy and loose, so I'm probably going to end up snugging up the steering stem just a little bit using this spanner nut right here. And also I noticed that the bars are rolled pretty far forward. I don't know if you can tell, but they're so these bars come back and they come out off to the sides like this, and they're rolled forward, so you're steering kind of like this on top of the front wheel. I think bringing them back to their natural position a little bit would help with stability a little bit too. So we're going to go ahead and snug up the steering stem just a little bit, just to get it to kind of have a little more drag in it, and then we're going to roll the bars back just a little bit, and that'll help him out until he gets new tires. To do that, we've got the front wheel off the ground. We need to loosen up this nut right here, and then we're going to snug up this spanner nut underneath the top bridge. Got that top nut loosened up. Now we can snug up the spanner nut a little bit. I think I've misplaced my spanner wrench to fit these, but I'm just going to use a flat screwdriver and tap it a little bit with a hammer. I don't recommend that, but you can get by with the. Be careful doing this too, because if you slip, probably going to gouge the tank or the chrome there, so don't get out of control, but make sure you're on it. It's still pretty loose. You don't want to make huge adjustments if somebody's used to, you know, riding in a different way and they hop on it and they've got new brakes and all that stuff, and the steering's tighter and the bars are rolled back. That's a lot of changes at once. We're just trying to snug it up just a little bit and make some minor changes. That's better. Give it just a little more, we'll probably call that good. If he wants to go more later, we can do that. I kind of want to lift it all the way up and make sure that the bearings do feel smooth and don't have notches. All right, we got that snugged up a little bit. Now I want to bring the bars back a little bit. You see right here, they're kind of, you have to have your elbows up in an angle. If we could bring them back just a little bit, have them maybe right. I'm gonna stand it up straight here. Looking at the sight glass, and it is right where it's supposed to be. I don't know if you can tell by the camera, but it's in between those two lines, just under the upper line. So we're good on oil. I don't see any oil drops on the ground here. Before it was leaking, just dropping. I don't feel any moisture. I believe we're all good there. So let's set the tire pressures and then we'll go for a ride. What's your all's guess on the front tire? I'm gonna go with 22 PSI. Hey, we're about 28. Looking at the frame here, 28 is what's recommended from Kawasaki for the original tire. This one may be a little different as far as recommendations, but 28. And we had 32 in the rear, so tire pressures were right on. Like to see that valve stem cap, that is. Beautiful. All right, let's give this thing a test ride. Much better. All right, now my least favorite part, picking up all the mess I made. Bike was good though. Everything was perfect. So, gonna call the customer and tell him it's all done. He can come pick it up, and there's a couple other things as far as the steering stem bearings and stuff he may want to do later. But as for now, it's good to go. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. When I was putting the brakes on, I ran into a couple issues. Plus my battery on my camera died, so it kind of didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Hopefully you learned something there though. Anyways, thanks for watching.